Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our first official Wednesday night education session. I see that we have quite a few people that are here live already, so I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Either type in the chat or wave if you can. I think there's emojis for that. Today, we are going to be getting into the topic of resistance training. We're going to cover how resistance training is different than weightlifting, and then also get into some specifics for exercises that you can apply to a lot of your training. And if you guys have questions about specific exercises as well, we can go into depth on that. For those of you who are attending live in our Crowdcast platform, you'll see underneath the Ask a Question, there is one question that I asked saying, what exercises do you struggle to feel the most? And then you're welcome to comment there. I will go through them as we go through each of the body parts. Hello, Christine. Hello, Winter. Hello, Simona. Thank you all for attending. I'm just going to hop onto our Facebook page and see if this is streaming live, because fingers crossed the technology works. It worked last week. All right, it looks like it is. So I'm going to flip in between the tabs sometime. So guys, if you're watching this live on Facebook, you're also welcome to ask questions in the comments below, and I shall see what is going on. So first thing is first, we are going to jump in. I have my clipboard of notes here that I put together. I didn't want to forget anything. We're going to discuss why resistance training is better than strength training and weightlifting in terms of muscle hypertrophy. So muscle hypertrophy is a term that I might be saying a lot in this, and essentially it means muscle growth. So within your muscles, think of if you've ever looked at a chicken breast, there's a whole bunch of stringy fibers that run in the same direction. Those are your muscle fibers. And in order to cause hypertrophy or making those fibers bigger, you need to approach training in a specific way. There are different types of muscle adaptations besides just a muscle getting bigger. You can get stronger without the muscle getting bigger. You can increase your muscular endurance without the muscle getting bigger. And when we look at body recomposition, those of you who are with LadyTheFUp, with ManTheFUp, with Hammer Fitness, we do body recomposition where we are aesthetically focused rather than going for strength and trying to hit PRs most of the time. So with resistance training and the goal of hypertrophy, what we want to do is think of your muscles. Let's use the deltoid for an example because it's easily seen here. Think of your muscles as having a gas tank, where this gas tank is filled with energy, which is broken down carbohydrates, stored as glycogen, which then gets converted to adenosine triphosphate, which is known as ATP. So we'll just keep it short. ATP is essentially your body's energy currency. So you've got your massive gas tank of ATP stored in your shoulder. So what we're trying to do is isolate the shoulder muscles without the triceps jumping in, without the traps jumping in to move the weight, so that we isolate that gas tank and use a little bit of ATP, take our set to failure. Oh my God, we can't do it anymore. Now we're going to take our rest. So anywhere from 45 seconds to ideally somewhere between 60 to 90 seconds. If it was a really heavy set, or maybe you're super exhausted, 2 minutes, 3 minutes in between. And as you're resting, your body is trying to make more ATP to send to the muscle to refill that glycogen store. But every time you do a set, it's going to refill a little bit, but it's not going to go to the top. So your goal when we give you a training session is to do a set to failure, relax, rest for a little bit, do a set to failure, rest, relax a little bit, do a set to failure, until by the end of the day, you cannot use that muscle anymore. You're like, oh my God, my arms are so dead. The muscles are shaking. I can't do it anymore. And that really only comes in when you're able to isolate a muscle. And it's hard to fight against your body because your body is designed to make things easy. It wants the easiest, fastest way that it knows how to do. So with resistance training, it's a lot of mental focus to ensure that you're isolating the muscle that you want without the other muscles jumping in to help. Using momentum is also a very common mistake that people do where, I don't know if I want to get into this yet. Okay, let's get into it anyways. So in different positions, the muscle is lengthened or it's shortened. So in the lengthened position of the muscle, you're going to be stronger, meaning you have more contractile power to contract really, really quickly and hard to make the top easier. And when you make the top easier by using momentum down here and launching it up, you're going to delay the amount of time it takes for you to fatigue. You're actually going to be doing more reps to try and hit failure, which makes it less efficient and it's not as good. You're spending more time and more energy and not getting the same or better benefits from taking it slow and controlled. So one of the analogies that I like to explain is, if anyone doesn't know the elastic bottle trick for tracking your water, completely side note, calculate how many of these you need to drink in a day to hit your water goal. And when you're done, slide it up, slide it down. It's an easy tracking way, but I'm just going to grab an elastic band here. So I want you to think of those muscle fibers, the things that are in the chicken breast or the steak or whatever it is that we look at, as reverse elastic bands. So when they're relaxed, they're stretched out. And then when we start to move it and our brain signals to the motor units in our muscles to say, okay, it's time to contract, it gets shorter. So this is what a muscle contraction is. We have the concentric, so the contracting where it comes in, and the eccentric where the muscle is lengthening again. So try and visualize that. So as you're doing a bicep curl, for example, I'll stand up so you can see me. My muscles are lengthened, my elastic bands are long. As I contract, they're starting to come together and tighten into a full contraction. So this is the concentric and this is the eccentric. We also have isometric, which is where essentially you're holding the muscle. So if I were to hold a dumbbell at 90 degrees for as long as I can, but this does not benefit muscle hypertrophy. Isometric contractions are really good for muscular endurance, meaning you can hold something for a really long time, but it's not going to help grow a muscle. So sometimes this is really beneficial for ladies who want to keep a tight waist. You'll notice that we don't have you doing a ton of weighted core exercises. We have you holding planks or holding stomach vacuums because we're trying to increase your muscular endurance in your core to improve your posture, but also to keep those muscles strong but smaller as we grow other parts of the body. Okay, so I'm going to, bear with me, try and share my screen here because I have a couple of videos that I want to show you to help with the visualization before we actually get into the interactive part. So give me a second here. Fingers crossed it all works. I don't want this window. I want the other window. Aha, lovely. Okay, so the first thing that I want to show you guys, I don't want to unfocus the screen. Let's go half and half. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is learn how to straighten our spine. So forget about the whole, I'm going to show you videos first. We're going to do this and kind of interact between the two. So if you are able to right now, stand up and do this with me. Leave your phone against something so you can stand up and do it with me. So when I turn to the side, you'll notice that I have a naturally occurring low back curve. And that is totally okay. You guys probably have it too. I have a larger curve than most people do, but that's because I grew up as a gymnast and this is how kind of my posture's set, and I'm learning to unlearn it and get better. But what we want to do before we get into absolutely any exercise is brace our core and set a neutral spine. So right now I don't have a neutral spine. I have a curve in my low back. The way that we set our core is you're going to inhale into your belly and your low back. So I want you to pretend that there's a balloon in the middle of your stomach and you're pushing out in both directions. And then when you exhale, I want you to push in and up, and you're going to feel your rib cage kind of sink underneath your body. So put your hand on your belly, take a slow, deep inhale, and then exhale. And look at what your ribs are doing. So I'm going to do it one more time. So automatically that tucks my rib cage underneath. My spine is now straight and I don't have a curve in my back compared to when I was standing like this. So this position of locking your core is incredibly important, whether you're doing a seated bicep curl, a standing lateral raise, a hip hinge, an RDL, a seated leg extension, whatever it is in terms of exercises. Before you start absolutely any set, I want you to put your hand on your stomach. And then oftentimes when I do a set, I'll actually have my hands on my ribs here to make sure that my core is still locked. And if I find that I'm 5 or 6 reps into a set and this is gone and I've let go of my core, I pause the middle of my set. I don't care how many reps that you're in. Take a deep breath, reset, and continue. If your spine is not in proper alignment, your resistance training is not going to be optimal, and you're going to use a lot of your core to move the weight of the isolated muscle that we want to work, okay? So you will see here, my spine is straight. There is a different position called a posterior pelvic tilt. So right now my spine is neutral. If I want to do a posterior, so make it even more, I'm going to tuck my bum in and bring my hips and ribs together. So this is a posterior pelvic tilt. This is the goal for the top of all of our glute exercises that are hinged. So this means your hip thrusts, your glute bridges, your RDLs. We want to get into that posterior tucked pelvis. Now, note, I'm not hunching forward. I'm not reaching with my arms. I'm tucking, kind of think of it like a dog who's scared and has its tail between its legs. We want to tuck that tail right in between our legs. We're terrified right now, and squeeze your butt as hard as you can. If you're tucking your tail between your legs and squeezing your butt and you don't feel a serious contraction right now, you're not squeezing hard enough, you're not tilting hard enough, okay? So let's go over those 3 positions again, shake it all out. We have our normal low back. Inhale, exhale, drop the rib down, neutral spine here. So this is what we want to start and keep our core engaged the entire set. And then we have our posterior pelvic tilt where we're tucking that tail between our legs like a scared dog and we're squeezing really, really hard, and you should feel it right in here. So that being said, I want to show you in terms of the anatomy, what is going on with your hip bones here. So I'm going to make this the focus screen.
And the gluteus maximus, which tilt the pelvis posteriorly.
So pay attention to what the spine's doing. The abs come in
posteriorly
and the hips pop back.
Abdomen leaves the mat. Concentrate your thought on contracting the abdominals and lifting the abdomen from the mat. You can also
so you'll see here that it uses the abs and the glutes at the same time. This is another way that you can practice it if you'd like. If you have trouble doing it standing right now, don't try it laying down yet. But the goal is to tuck that rib cage underneath the body, tuck the hips forward, and keep the abs contracted. All right, so that is bracing your core. Before I get into more of the exercises, I do want to go over the difference between resistance training. Hold on, one of my videos just finished. I do want to go over the resistance training versus weightlifting versus strength training and what the difference is, because a lot of times on social media, the words get mixed up and interchanged, and they are quite different. So with resistance training, we're isolating that muscle and we're taking the set to contractile failure. With weightlifting, weightlifting is performing movements, whereas resistance training is contracting muscles. So when we weightlift, that's your squats and your deadlifts and conventional shoulder presses, or if you go into a gym, you sit on the leg press and you just straighten your legs and you come back down, you straighten your legs. Or if you're doing, the lat pull down or the row, you're just pulling the arms back and there's no specific intent. You're just kind of training a movement pattern and allowing all of the muscles to jump in and help. I remember when I first started in the gym, there was a back row machine at the gym. And it was a single arm where the chest was supported. I'll back up a little bit more just to act this out. And you had the handle here and you could pull it and crank it. And I got up to, I'm going to say I think it was almost a 45, a 25, and either a 5 or a 10 on there for one arm pulls. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm so strong. And yes, getting stronger and increasing your weight in weightlifting is really encouraging and it pats your ego. But if you want to get better, you need to chuck your ego at the door. If I had slowed it down, so instead of me going, oh, I'm so strong, I'm such a badass, everyone is looking at me, this is great. If I had slowed it down to the drive your elbow down towards your hip, contract just your lat, and then once it passes your body, slight turn away for a maximum contraction, I'm feeling the pinch right in here when I'm here compared to just pulling. I would have made gains so much faster than I did for the first, call it 2 years of me being in the gym. Let's get into a little bit of examples as well. So for strength training, this is more where people are focused on getting stronger by programming with specific weights and sets. So if you go into a gym, oftentimes you'll test your 1 rep max or your 4 to 5 rep max, and then you will use those numbers to calculate, okay, if my 1 rep max is 100 pounds, I'm going to start with 50% of my 1 rep max for warm up, and then I'm going to do 80 to 90% of my 1 rep max for 3 to 5 reps. It's very specific, and the goal is to increase strength. But increasing strength is not the same as increasing muscle size. You can get way stronger by cueing with your brain to connect to all of the muscles at the same time. So if you're doing a squat, for example, using your glutes, using your hamstrings, using your quads, your calves, and your low back all at once to move a load of weight really, really fast or with momentum so that you can get up and down. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the same as growing your muscles when focusing on a specific muscle. With weightlifting as well, think of the military, and you have all of these super fit people that can do like 150 push-ups or 150 pull-ups, but they're not really big guys. Why? Because in order to do push-ups or pull-ups or any sort of body weight exercises with high reps, or any exercises with high reps for that matter, you need muscular endurance. And muscular endurance, your body doesn't want to make the muscle big because it's going to contract a lot. Your body learns over what you do repeatedly day after day after day. So if you're doing 25, 30, 35, 40 push-ups, all of a sudden the body goes, hey, you know what? We can't add on more muscle right now because that muscle is going to take up more energy. So instead of us adding more muscle, we're going to make neurological adaptations to make the current muscle that we have more efficient. So if doing 100 push-ups is your goal, that's great, but don't expect your chest to get massive just from doing push-ups. You will see improvements because yes, the muscle is going to change a little bit, but it's not going to grow. Also think like push-ups and pull-ups. Sure, the military guys, picture them in your head. They're built, they're lean, but they're not bodybuilders. Think of the massive bodybuilders that you see on stage. They're like 200, 250 pounds, sometimes even 300. Those guys can barely do any push-ups or pull-ups because they're not doing weight training. They're doing resistance training where they're recruiting specific muscles. And they're using different strategies where it's not how many more reps can I do, it's how can I isolate this muscle and take it to failure. Does anyone have questions on that before I move on? I will also check Facebook. Let me refresh the page. Take a water break. You guys can take a water break too. Stay hydrated. Cool. No questions so far. Okay, so I'm going to show you the difference between weightlifting and resistance training for a shoulder press. So behind me in my office gym, I have some dumbbells. I've got a set of 20s, a set of 8s, and a set of 5s. So I'm going to show you what weight lifting for a shoulder press would look like. So these are 20 pounds. I can get them up. So I'm still slow and controlled here, but I'm using momentum at the bottom to push up. I have aligned my body so that I'm using the most muscles possible. This is not just my delts. This is my delts. This is my traps. This is my triceps. And I could probably rep out another like 10 to 15 of these without me getting tired. But with that being said, I want you to look at where my elbow position is. Okay, so from the side, as I start to fatigue, maybe I'll give myself some lower push momentum. Maybe I'll flail my ribs out so that I can still get the weight up and do more reps. But that is not going to grow my shoulders. Out of all of the parts of my body that I felt doing that, the biggest part I felt it was in my traps. And women especially, you don't really want to grow your traps. It's not going to enhance your shape. It's going to hide more of your neck. So we really want to isolate the delts and go for those nice round shoulders. So instead, I'm going to bring my box over. I'm going to do this seated. So when I do it seated, I take out the risk of me leg pressing my weight up, and I take out the risk of me driving my hips forward. So we're going to inhale with our stomach, exhale, lock the rib cage there. Now with my 8-pound dumbbells, so I went from 20 pounds down to 8, so 12 pounds less per arm. I'm going to not bring my arms out to the side, but I'm going to bring them forward a little bit more. And what I am thinking about here is pushing my body into the seat. With resistance training, one of the best cues that you can do is think of the opposite force. So I'm pushing my arms up towards the ceiling. I'm pushing my body into the floor at the same time. I'm also going to have my elbows slightly out. It's very important in a shoulder press that your arms do not come in this way or out this way. Okay, so this is going to use more bicep, and it's moving the weight from the hardest part to an easier part of the movement. Same thing with out here. It's easier when it's not at the 90 degrees. So you want to make sure that your wrist is straight up and down. Same thing this way. If I extend my arms out, that's going to be easier. This is going to be easier. Internally and externally rotating. This is going to be easier. This is going to be easier. So you really need to be mindful and pay attention. Resistance training is all about intent. If you have mirrors where you can watch yourself, I highly recommend, like, even if you're training at home, bring a mirror around so you can see what you're doing. So from here, I'm going to think about driving my arms in a Y. So I'm stretching overhead, keeping my rib cage down. So when I do this, I'm not flailing out. That's using a lot of my back muscles to be like, yeah, we can move the weight. So we want to do the inhale, exhale, keep that locked. And then I'm stretching my arms forward. So when I do the shoulder press, I don't really care about what my wrist is doing as long as it's pointed straight up to the ceiling. I'm focusing on what this muscle is doing instead. So think of those reverse elastic bands. We have the long stretched out muscle. When it contracts, it's coming up over my head. But this is the full contraction of my shoulders. If I want to go any more, that's my triceps. And we want to isolate the muscle. So I'm not going to do the full weightlifting version of a shoulder press where I come up all the way. I'm actually going to stop a little bit short just when my shoulders are at peak contraction and I can't go anymore. Okay, so I'm going to inhale, exhale, brace that core. My elbows are stretched forward. I'm going to push my body into the seat as hard as I can. Press up in a Y. That's as far as I can go. Yes, I can go here, but that's weightlifting. I'm going to stretch my elbows forward as well until I feel a stretch in my shoulder. There's a difference. There's passive and there's active ranges of motion. So when I lower my shoulder to about here, this is where I stop the muscle from loading. So you can try this at home too. I want you to put your hand on your shoulder and figure out if it's hanging by your side. Is it contracted? Can you feel a mass underneath your skin? The answer is no, that is not under load. So how far here? This is where I start to feel my muscle contract. And then if I continue through the range, that about there is the optimal contraction. It's going to be different for everyone. This is where putting your hand on your body, feeling your muscles contract, is going to be one of the biggest things that you can do to set yourself up for success. So from here, I'm forward, I'm pushing down into the seat, I'm driving my elbows up into that Y, and I'm coming right back down. So everything is slow and controlled here. The 8 pounds is actually really heavy. So I'm gonna get rid of those, and I'm gonna grab my 5s. So if any of you that are watching either live or the replay right now, if you are doing shoulder presses with 10 pounds or 8 pounds, really ask yourself, am I isolating my delts or should I go lighter? I have been training for 6 years, okay? I still use 5 pounds because that's where I feel just my delts and not my traps and triceps. So from here, drive it up, stretch the elbows forward, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. If I wanted to keep going for like 50 reps, oh boy, I could. 5 pounds is really light when you're using momentum. I can throw the dumbbells. Let's hope they don't hit me. But if you're slow and controlled and intentful and thinking about the contraction, you can make 5 pounds feel like 50. Okay, so this is what it would look like from the sides. You want to make sure your dumbbells aren't out here. Your dumbbells aren't in here. They're stacked right over your elbows and they stay stacked. Stretch it forward. Exhale on the hard part. Inhale on the easy. Keeping those abs tight the entire time. Whew. And you can go until you cannot anymore. I'm not going to go till failure because I still have a lot of things that we want to talk about. Does that make sense for shoulders, guys? Thumbs up anywhere? I need a drink. Whew. Awesome. Thanks, Corey. Okay. Oh, I was going to show you. Let's share the screen again. No, we don't want glutes yet. So this is the delts. So what you're going to see here is this front part. This is your anterior delt. So it's the front of your shoulder. And then this middle part here is your medial or your side delt. So that's the one right here on this side. That's probably what you felt during your shoulder press. But as you lower, depending on where your elbows were in terms of like directly in front of you to out to the side, if they were more forward, you're going to feel it in your front delt. If they were kind of out to the side, you would feel it in your side delt. And then this little guy back here is your posterior delt or your rear delt, which is right back here. Let's continue the video. So again, that's your middle and your posterior. And this is what it's doing in a lateral raise. So it's those reverse elastic bands that are coming together. So what I want you to kind of think about, if you can visualize this in your training, and I highly recommend after getting off this call, if you go to the Muscle and Motion YouTube page and then just like type in different muscles so you can see the whole body. We only have a finite amount of time today. We're already like, I know we're going to run over. So it'll be closer to the hour mark for sure. But if it cuts off after that, we'll do part 2. But I want you to pay attention to the muscle fibers here and how they're contracting. So in this lateral raise, my arm is coming up to the side, but notice that there's no shrugging. Here, let me split screen so you guys can see me a little bit more. So as it comes out to the side, my side delt is contracting. But a lot of you out there right now are doing your lateral raises like this, where your trap comes in to raise at the same time because the weight is too heavy for just your delt to move. So let's continue in this video. There's the shoulder press and what it would look like there. Okay, so when we're pressing overhead, I want you to look at the skeleton's arm. The arm is not fully straight and extended. There is still a slight bend in there because the shoulder does not straighten your arm. It just brings your arm up. The front delt brings the arm to the front, and notice the skeleton's palm there is in. So when I'm doing it, it's my palm is in, my front delt is now on top. If I turn my palm down, my front delt is now over here, and it's my side delt that's now on top. So some of you that are following our resistance training programs, you'll notice in the videos that we do, when we say a side delt raise or a side lateral raise, you're not coming directly out to the side. You're slightly forward and your palm is down. So some people see this as a front raise. It's a delt raise for your side delts. When it's not out here, it's slightly more forward so that we can isolate this without your traps jumping in, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But if you want to train your front delt and isolate it that way, your palm comes in so that this comes in alignment. So let's jump back to this video. It also brings the arm into the body as part of the chest, or helps with the chest. So if you're doing like chest flies like this, especially with your palm down, that contributes to front delt work, but it's also chest work at the same time. And your posterior delt moves the arm behind the body. So that would be, whoop, don't fall off the ball. If I'm here, I'm bringing it down and back here, but I'm not squeezing my shoulder blade together, okay? So there's a difference between me going like this and squeezing my shoulder blades together at the same time. That's recruiting these mid-back muscles, your traps and your rhomboids, compared to me just driving that arm behind my body as hard as I can. I don't feel it in here whatsoever, but oh man, is my rear delt lit up. Okay, so they all have specific movements where if you isolate it, you can get just that muscle to drain its gas tank and make it grow. So this is a full delt raise. If you're coming up, this is a really good example of why sometimes you feel your traps. So in this analogy, the dude man is coming straight out to the side. So doing their lateral raise this way. And you'll notice in the video that the delt muscles and the trap fibers, they all run in the same direction. So they're all running this way. When you look at pictures of muscles, the way that the lines are drawn shows the direction that the muscle is going to contract in. So if your traps and your delts are all aligned to come this way, your traps are a much bigger muscle group, and the body's like, the delts, they're tiny, weak little bitch muscles. We're going to give them part of the load, but we know that they cannot handle all of it. So hey, traps, can you jump in and help? This is where you need to override that mentally. You need to think about not using your traps and just doing it with your delt. If you need to, I do this all the time when I'm training, put one hand on your trap and just do single arm. And if you feel your trap jumping in, the weight is too heavy. If you cannot isolate just your delt and your trap doing body weight, doing what I'm doing right now, of drive that arm up, bring it back down. I don't feel my trap at all. It's just my delt. You need to practice that before you're ready to move on to weight, okay? So going back to this video, okay, look, see how much load the traps are doing there? So it gets to a specific point where the arm is abducted as high as it can go. Like this is as far up as my arm can go before my scapula starts to shrug up as well. So you need to stay within that active range of motion. Remember that we did it previously where we found, okay, not down here, my delt's not contracted. Here it is. And then if I keep going, okay, it's fully contracted here, it can't contract anymore. Now other muscles jump in. You want to stay in the window of here to here for your entire set and not use momentum at the lengthened position where it's easier. So if I grab, let me back up. I will close this for now. If I grab my 8-pound dumbbells, okay? If I'm lateral raising 8 pounds, I can do 1, 2, and maybe a third, maybe a fourth if I push really hard. But if I use momentum, this feels like nothing. Like, give me the 20 pounds. This is super easy, but I don't feel this in my delts at all. I feel it in my traps. I feel it a little bit in my triceps, but my delts aren't the prime mover. So we want to pick a weight. I would say, like, for 5 pounds for lateral raises, when I'm training, I will start with 5 pounds and then I'll drop to either 2 to 3 pound dumbbells, or if you're ever in the gym, 2.5 pound plates are amazing to burn out your shoulders, okay? So it's slow and controlled. I feel like I could do somewhere between 12 and 20 of these, which is appropriate for shoulder repetitions. And I'm not using my traps. If I really want to, I can drop a dumbbell. I can do it single arm just to make sure that my traps aren't jumping in. Okay. So something to apply for any of your training. If you want to feel your glutes, put your hands on your butt. I don't really care. I put my hands on my butt even when I'm in the gym, because I don't care what other people are thinking about. I'm so in the zone in training that I need to feel the muscle. And if you find that your mind is wandering to other things, oh, I still have to do this. Shit, that was such a dumb thing to say to that person. Whatever is on your mind, go back to visualizing the lengthened to contracted muscle to lengthened to contracted. Okay. What else? I think that was it in terms of that. Just remember that for strength training and weightlifting, it's about wanting to be efficient so that you can do more. With resistance training, we actually want to be the least efficient possible so that for years and years to come, if I'm 6 years into training and I'm still using 5 pounds on my shoulders, 10 years from now, maybe I'll be using 10. Who knows? Maybe I'll still be using 5s and just finding new techniques, or I'm even better at isolating my delts. But it's never about how heavy you're lifting. It's not even about how many reps you're doing. Yes, we give you rep ranges for guidelines, but I don't count reps. None of our coaches, when we train, count reps. In the app, I know it asks you to track your reps and your weight, but if you get lost in your brain being like, I'm just going to push to failure, make up an approximate number. If it's felt like 15, if it felt like 20, if it felt like 25, the tracking is much more for you than it is for us as coaches. And just really focus on however many reps it takes you to get to failure. And it's about quality reps over quantity. So if you feel like, oh my God, I'm exhausted at 8, you did 8. Don't try and go for that 9th or that 10th unless you know that your form is going to be quality, okay? I'm gonna take a break, hop over to Facebook, see if anyone has any questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Nope, not yet. Cool, no questions. All right, so the next thing that I am going to move on to, page 2, is how to hinge properly. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is a visualization of our muscle men. Okay, so when we are looking at a hinge pattern, we're focusing predominantly on the glutes and the hamstrings, but more so the glutes in most of the exercises that we give you. I don't want any sound, please. So what you'll see, let me jump back to that guy that said, don't do it. No. Aha. So what you'll see here in the X X that is wrong compared to the one that's right is as the guy is bending over, he's starting to drop his chest. And this is something we see a lot in hinge patterns where we want to keep the upper body and the lower body locked the entire time. So our goal is to keep the spine in a straight line and keep our body, our lower body locked as well. And it's all about moving on the hinge pattern here. So there's a couple cues that you can think of. Closing a car door with your butt, pretending that there's an elastic band wrapped around your hips that are pulling you back, but you'll see the only part of his body that's really moving is his hips. And as he comes forward, he's contracting his glutes and his hamstrings with the reverse elastic muscles to drive forward. So this is where your glute attaches at the top of your hip bone, and then it also inserts on the back of your thigh bone. So when those reverse elastic bands come together, it's going to pull the hip up straight towards the body. Same thing with the hamstrings. They attach on the bottom of the hip area and then to the bottom of the femur to pull it down. We also have our low back muscles, which in an RDL, we don't want to use too much of. They're there to stabilize, but we don't want them to move the weight. And then we have our core, keeping our rib cage locked down after we brace it. Okay. So let me get rid of this. And I don't care if I have taught you this. I don't care if we have gone over this in a form review call. Even if this is your first one, time to get up and stand. And we are going to go over the hinge pattern together. I'm going to tilt you guys down a little bit more. Whoop, there's a dumbbell there. Okay, so the very first thing that we are going to do, inhale our belly, exhale, drop the rib cage down. Now my spine is straight. You're going to lock this right here, and it's going to be locked the entire time. If you ever feel your body come out of it, take a break, reset, get into that spinal position. The next thing that we are going to do is I want you to imagine that from your kneecaps down is a wine bottle, and your kneecaps are the cork, okay? And your thighs are the corkscrew. So we are now going to corkscrew the thighs apart. We don't want to externally rotate our knees and twist at the knee joint. I want the twist to come from the hips, and it's corkscrewing those knees outwards. So that should automatically engage parts of the side of your glute here. Okay, so our core is going to be braced, our knees are corkscrewed out, and we're in a solid stance so that if someone were to come and try and push me over, I have a solid base. The feet, you can either point them out a little bit or forward. Your feet can be hip width apart, your feet can be shoulder width apart. This is going to vary from individual to individual based on your own hip length, torso length, upper body length, femur length. So play around with whatever position works. We're going to get into the position I just covered. Corkscrew those knees out. Now I want you to imagine that there is an elastic band or a rope that is pulling you backwards, and there's a button right here that you need to press with your butt. So your upper body is locked. It is not moving, okay? Your lower body is locked. It's not moving either. The only thing that's moving is your hips in this exercise. You're gonna put your hands on your corkscrewed thighs so they're turned out. And I want you to tuck your chin and look at your toes. From here, those hips are going to go back. And I want you to send them as far back as you can until you start to feel a stretch in your glute ham tie-in. So right in like where your butt meets the back of your thighs. When you feel that stretch, this is now the bottom of your rep. Why? Because if I go any lower, I now lose that core brace because I have to lean forward, and I'm now bending with my back like we saw with the muscle guy. So we don't want to use our back, because if I'm down here, I now have to use these muscles to get me back up to where my glutes were in their fully lengthened position. So same thing with the shoulders, where I can have the active range of motion from here to here. Anything past, hold on. Anything past here My glutes are stretched. They cannot do the work. They cannot move anymore. It's not going to benefit my glutes. So here, when I'm at the part where I feel the stretch, I'm keeping those thighs corkscrewed out. I'm keeping my chin tucked at my toes. I'm now going to think of the opposite force of pushing my body into the ground through my heels as hard as I can while I drive my hips forward into that scared dog leg between or tail between the legs, posterior pelvic tilt that gives you that nice ugly glute squeeze. So to recap, stand up, shake it all out, inhale through the belly, exhale, drop the ribs down, squeeze it there. This is what you do for every set of any exercise that you do. Next step, we're going to corkscrew those thighs out. Place your hands flat on your thighs. Tuck your chin in, look down at your toes, send those hips back, 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 back until you feel a stretch in your glutes and hamstrings. This is as low as you're going. My core is still locked. I'm going to squeeze where I feel the stretch, drive my hips forward, push my body down into the floor, and tuck my tail under like a scared dog. If your legs are not shaking in this top position, you are not squeezing hard enough, you are not corkscrewing your knees out far enough either, okay? The tempo for this when we do it is going to be 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. So when you look at me here, I'm not fully standing up at the top of my rep. Why? Because my abs are still engaged. If I want to stand up straight, that's my low back. Also because I have a slight bend in my knees from the corkscrew. And if, again, I wanted to stand up straight, that's my quads. So we want to get ourselves into a setup position that's going to allow us to isolate the glutes without our low back jumping into help, without our quads allowing us to stand up at the top. So I'll show you the difference between a weightlifting RDL with caution. So again, these are 20-pound weights. If I do a weightlifting RDL, down to the floor, back up, down to the floor, back up, down to the floor, back up. And you know what? That already hurts my back because I have back issues. So I am going to be nicer to my spine. I'm going to grab, I would say like 10, 15 pounds would be enough for me. The 20s would be okay if I was warmed up properly and I had the strength to do so. But if we're doing an RDL this way, set up the core, corkscrew the knees. You want to keep the weight as close to your body as you can. As I lower, if it comes farther out, what now has to take over? My back, right? So we want to keep it as close to your body as possible the entire time. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, there's the stretch. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. And already I can feel my butt burning, and that's with 8 pounds, and what was that, like 4 reps, something like that. So it's about how you contract the muscle, not the movement, not the weight, and not the range of going all the way down in the movement. Does anyone have questions about the hinge before I move on? No? Let me check Facebook. Okay. One more thing that I want to share with you guys is the difference between a good morning and a hinge. So with an RDL or a hinge, we're coming back and my hips are going behind my legs. With an RDL, which is typical, or sorry, that's an RDL, okay? Your hips are going back, even if you're doing any type of deadlift. So if I'm like this and doing a sumo, my hips are going back and then they're coming forward. A good morning is typically where you have a weight, either a barbell on your back or something behind you, and you're hinging forward at the hips. And this is all, well, almost all low back because I'm leaning forward and I'm using my erectors to stand back up. So you want to make sure when you're doing an RDL, your hips go back, rather than your body goes forward. I lose my balance already, okay? If you are still struggling with this, practice, 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 practice. And if you're working with a LadyTheFUp coach, never hesitate within our app. You can record a 60-second video, send it to your coach and be like, hey, coach, can you check my form really quickly? And we're more than happy to give you feedback. We would much rather have you guys ask for like all of the exercises that we put in your program if your form is correct, rather than you assume that you're doing it right, even if you're not feeling it correctly, and then go like 8 weeks or 12 weeks or however long your program is, wasting that specific exercise. Let's have a look at the questions. Okay, so what exercises do you struggle to feel the right muscle in? The first one here, we have Corey saying hamstrings in a deadlift. So this is where you would need, if you're trying to feel your hamstrings in an RDL or something like this, you would very likely need to stretch your hamstrings more. So one thing that you can do, take your dumbbells, put them under your toes so that as you're hinging, even when I get down here, I'm getting way more of a hamstring stretch, and I can squeeze, instead of thinking about squeezing up here, you can squeeze farther down here and think about driving your quads back. So we always want to think of the opposite movement of what we're doing. So if I think about, without me actually doing it, thinking about driving those hips forward and pulling back, because the hamstrings try to bend the knee. So if I'm trying in my head to curl towards, that'll isolate it a little bit better. But try elevating your toes, and just that extra amount of stretch as you go down might help. But don't hesitate to reach out to your coach as well. I'll be buying lighter weights tomorrow. That's what I like to hear. Other things that you guys can use if you're at home and you don't have light weights: frozen water bottles, laundry detergent, like even soup cans are probably heavy enough. What else we got? So Christine cannot feel lower lats and hamstrings, erectors take over. So try bracing your core. If you have a specific exercise for what you want me to cover with that, let me know. Lats is going to be, looking at the time, it's definitely going to be a future video, but we will cover that. I can't nail down an RDL. I hope, Karine, that the answer that I previously gave was helpful for that. How do you know when you've been successful at training for hypertrophy during your session? How does it feel? How is it different than training for strength? Ooh, this is a good question. So let me show you right now what taking a set to failure looks like. I'll do it with my shoulders because that's what I have the equipment for. So I am going to start with my 8 pounds. When you train to failure, you're going to hit a point where the muscle starts to burn and you can keep going. And then once you keep going, you're going to find it way more difficult just to isolate that muscle without other muscles jumping in to help. That is a sign that you then want to decrease the weight. So I'm going to start with 8 pounds on my shoulder press. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2. I trained shoulders earlier today, so they're already nice and tired. Slow and controlled the entire time. Sometimes it takes me 2 to 3 minutes to take a set to failure. Again, I'm not counting reps and just focusing on muscle contraction. So 8 pounds, I don't know, I'm like somewhere between 5 and 10 reps in. I can't get that up without my traps jumping in. So I'm now going to drop down to my 5 pounds, continue with that same motion. So now my muscles are starting to burn. My shoulders are saying, this isn't fun. We don't like this. We don't want to do this anymore. And this is where pushing through that signaling matters the most, because neurologically, this is where the hypertrophy signaling starts to happen. Your muscles are telling the brain, hey, we don't have enough motor units, which are like the little signals that tell your muscles to fire. We don't have enough of those, and we're not strong enough to move this load. Ugh. And with that muscular messaging, hold on, I can't talk and do this at the same time. So I'm going to apply something called a rest pause, where you take about 3 to 5 seconds to allow your body to refill that muscle gas tank just a little bit. I'm going to get right back into it. So you see, my set would have been done, but I still have reps. I still have gas in that tank. Whew. Push that body into the seat as hard as I can. My traps are trying to jump in, so mentally I have to tell myself, push my body into the seat as hard as I can. Keep those elbows tucked in. So you're going to notice that my body wants to go like this, because this is way easier to push up than keeping my elbows over my wrists. But I'm still not done. I'm going to grab a resistance band. I'm going to wrap it around the feet. Nope, that's too heavy. So this is where, with resistance training, you don't need dumbbells. You don't need heavy weights. You buy a set of resistance bands off Amazon. So what I just did there, my feet were wider on the band, more tension. My feet are now closer on the band. Oh. So now I'm getting into, my muscles are shaking as I'm trying to get it up, and I'm literally thinking as hard as I can, and they don't want to contract. This is where my traps are trying to take over, my triceps are trying to take over, and I'm done. So that is taking a set to failure, but I know that I have way more left in me. If I were to take a 90-second break and get back in, I could do that again. I could probably do it 3 or 4 more times, but I'm going to be able to do less reps every set I do, because that muscle gas tank is going deplete, refill, deplete, refill, deplete, refill. So you want to make sure that when you're done at the end of your session, when you're done at the end of your set, your muscle physically cannot contract anymore. And it's like, if I were to check my heart rate right now, it'd probably be up at like 115, 120, just from training shoulders. And I got a really nice pump just from that one set. So we're coming up on an hour now. I still have so much more to cover. So we will do this in future weeks. I just want to go through, make sure that I have answered all of your questions. Check Facebook. Awesome. So no questions there. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up here. There is so much more that I want to teach you guys. I got through like a page and a quarter. So there will be many sessions every single Wednesday. Keep showing up 8 p.m. Toronto time. If you can't make it out on 8 p.m., the replays are going to be available as well. Same link. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I think there were like 50 of you, which blows my mind. Thank you for spending an hour with me tonight. If you're watching the replay, thank you for spending an hour with me. If you guys have any questions or things you want me to cover more specifically in future weeks, send me a DM, fill out that form that was sent out to the LadyTheFUp clients, and I will see you all again next week. Next week, we're going to cover nutrition, so more like macro-based stuff. And then I guess it'll be the 21st. We'll come back to resistance training. If you're a LadyTheFUp client, take a ton of videos, send them to your coaches for form review. You're not bothering us. We want to make sure you're doing things correctly. But I hope that you at least learned a little bit of shoulders and a little bit of hinge stuff that you didn't know before. So sending you all love, LadyTheFUp, and I'll see you next